Well, here we are. So the purpose for today is to study Chapter 9, which is Document and Content Management of the DMBOK. This is a really good one. It's sort of information that is not typically stored in relational databases. In just a few minutes, we're going to do a Pomodoro session where we read the book and then we'll come together to discuss. So we read for 20 minutes and then we discuss for 10-ish. Sometimes we go over into the next session. And then we do that 3 total times until the end of our allotted time. Now we will prioritize our reading of Chapter 9. So I will catch up with you guys in 14 minutes and 30 seconds. Okie doke. So that was our first Pomodoro session. At this time, folks can jump in if they have questions about what they read or if there's anything that really stood out to them as being particularly impactful.
Well, actually, I do have a question. On page 308, it's about content modeling. There's a section over there that says there are 2 levels of content modeling. The first is at the information product level, and the second is at the component level. And at the component level, I'm not sure if I understand that completely. Can I translate that to the ingredients on a shampoo bottle or something like that? Because it says it's in further detail of the elements that make up the product model.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. So in your example with the shampoo bottle, the shampoo is the document and the label that has the ingredients. And an even better example would be like nutritional facts. Please don't eat your shampoo, but like on a box of crackers, that just provides more metadata. I think in this example, the shampoo or the crackers is the content, and then the modeling is the ingredients label.
We're starting to use a system called Calibra, which is supposed to be a data cataloging system.
Yeah.
And they just recently asked us, hey, you need to provide descriptions within your perimeter. And that perimeter was supply chain. And then they broke down business topics within supply chain to 17 different categories like production, transportation, and freight payment, and things like this that are different components of supply chain. And then they say, here are some tables out of 100 something tables. Here are the different tables assigned to each of these categories, these business topics. And then they say, here are the columns within those tables. And we want you to provide a description for the column level. Then we need you to provide a description for the table level. And then your obligations fulfilled for the cataloging of this content. So what resonated with me was this talks about data repository or maybe metadata, some different things I thought about when I was reading this anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. This session is not sponsored by Calibra, but I do hear from my audience that this is a very popular and commonly used tool. It sort of provides software for data governance.
Are there cases that an organization is thinking about using a certain type of database to store this? You can store this in a normal database as a text field, all that information, but I can also imagine that you want to use a certain type of database for handling this.
Yeah, so it's not really discussed so much in this chapter, but there is a type of document storage called a document database. The most popular company that implemented this was called Mongo. So their product was MongoDB, and it was really popular, kind of probably between the time when the DMBOK was written and up to a couple of years ago. It was like the thing that they taught back-end engineers how to use. But I think it's kind of fallen out of favor a little bit. I don't know if other people have industry gossip that is more fresh than mine, but I think a lot of people realize that document storage is not as useful as relational storage for most things. Relational tables have a lot of useful properties in terms of keeping information organized. And document storage is a schema-less way of structuring your content storage. So it's great for documents, but it's challenging for working with other types of data. So that's kind of fallen out of favor. But that's my reaction to your question. This is the document data store schema-less structure. If you need a reminder on what that terminology means, then I would refer you to checking out chapter 5, which is the data modeling chapter. That talks about the various schemas and the impact that it might have on business outcomes. Large organizations typically will use different schemas across different data types. It's definitely an interesting thing to learn more about and to consider for your particular use cases.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right. Well, that was our first discussion session. I'm going to put us back into a reading session now, and hopefully that helps to spur some thoughts. And we'll also talk about questions from the reading that you guys do in the next 20 minutes. All right. So that was session 2. Hopefully people felt very focused and got a lot of reading done. Okay, so I said I would share my screen and we could do a little bit of review. So document and content management. It's 6% of the exam. That means it's sort of middling importance. Like there's some chapters that are only 2%. There's a couple that are 11%, so that we get to 100 questions total. I think this chapter is pretty straightforward. I'm sure you guys are noticing that there's a lot of vocabulary, but generally the idea is that if your information is stored in a format other than quantitative base data with some qualitative descriptor data, that format fits really well with a STAR schema. But if it's documents or any other kind of unstructured media, then a different approach is required. So that's what we're talking about today. Okay, this is the Aiken framework. Document and content management helps promote efficient asset retrieval across your different platforms and systems. As we discussed, there might be a dedicated content management system, or maybe it's a document store database. Maybe it's a data lake. There's different approaches, and your business probably has implemented different kinds of document stores depending on the prevailing needs of the time and maybe what was popular or what was even available when that storage system was created. So there's different approaches. It's definitely more complicated than storing simple relational data. The idea here is that we are ensuring that these documents or other semi-structured or unstructured data are available. This is often quite useful for compliance and audit. The chapter talks about e-discovery and the process of finding electronic records that might serve as evidence in legal action. There's other compliance requirements for storing this kind of data, which depends on the nature of your business and where your organization operates. Cool. So there's lots of vocab. I don't really want to get into too much detail. Hopefully I'll see you guys back at the end of the month if you're interested in that. It's a benefit for Data Strategy Pros members and also community and events members. I just wanted to highlight that. Last thing is that document and content management requires a lot of planning, and it also is useful to think through how these unstructured assets fit into your overall enterprise data architecture. Creating specific content handling procedures and adding those to your data governance documents is also crucial. There should be a specific, clearly outlined document lifecycle. Again, like these documents, they require different handling depending on compliance requirements often. So you have to think about how long you need to keep things versus how easy it needs to be to purge information. And that should inform the creation of this data lifecycle specifically for content. And then the final step here is to actually execute and manage the data over the course of its life. I'll stop there. Do folks have any comments or questions about what was shared or about the reading that they've done?
I was just going to make a comment that I think it's really important what they're talking about here with establishing vocabularies, which is kind of my reason for being here too, is to learn the vocabulary of the industry, right?
Absolutely.
Everyone has their own vocabulary within their own industry that they work in. And sometimes you'll hear different people say different things when they really mean the same thing. So establishing that consistency across the organization, I think is really important. And that kind of starts with, we're so data dependent these days. The technical experts are really involved when they name columns, tables, attributes, metrics in databases and these things. It's important that they do so that's easy to understand, and that the business units and the technical experts are kind of in agreement with what those things mean and how they should be named so that they can find what they're looking for more easily.
Yeah, I just want to echo everything that you're saying, and especially the fact that the vocabulary should be business specific. This is really important for getting everybody on the same page and increasing buy-in. I think the trickiest thing about this chapter is just learning all the vocab and learning what's what, because there's a lot of terminology that's pretty similar. Maybe flashcards would be a good strategy. And I definitely did a lot of highlighting too when I was reading this. Just some suggestions for you guys. Another test prep tip that I wanted to share while I have a group here is just make sure that when you're doing practice questions, make sure you're creating a log of questions that you struggle with. And this is questions that you're not sure about the answer, but you still got it right. And also questions that you got wrong. We are coming up on time to start our final session, but does anybody else have any test taking tips that they found to be useful and would like to share with the group?
Repeat, 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 repeat.
Like continue to review the
Yeah,
notes and
review them, repeat it time after time again. You need to get it into your system, I think.
nice. Good, Rec. So think about your favorite test taking tips. We'll share some additional ones if people have them after our final session of reading. So I will share my screen. All right. Thank you so much for coming today. It was really good to interact with some new folks and some old folks. Hopefully we all learned a little bit about document content management. Another thing I wanted to ask about is if people have a preferred PDF viewer. Taking the test with the ebook copy, that might be considered a test taking tip because, of course, you can use Control F in the ebook. There's no such Control F for a physical book. I mean, there's the index, but it is kind of incomplete. I just have Preview on my Mac, but it's not the greatest tool for reviewing PDFs. And I'm curious if people have other recommendations or other tools that they have for the ebook.
I am using Adobe and that's working fine for me.
Okay, got it. Evelyn says she's also struggling with how to comment and mark chapters. So maybe invest in Adobe because that is the leading.
Well, the nice thing is Adobe, you can download it for free. You can add comments into the book. You can highlight rules. You cannot add remarks because for that you need to have the paid version. But just for comments, highlighting, for me, that's sufficient.
Cool. That's great. Thanks for that report. I'll have to download it so I can also do that. One thing I wanted to say is some people were using text-to-speech tools to generate audiobook kind of experience for their review. If you're like doing the dishes, but you really want to get some review done, maybe that's another strategy to consider. Okay, well, that's all I've got for today, folks, and I hope to see you all again next time.